for all of us when we say we are so honored to be a part of what you're about to do in your lives to one another. And so before we get to the good stuff, which to me is the vows, I wanted to share with you a word of encouragement. As I was preparing for today, I thought back on almost 20 years of conversations I've had with married couples, some of them right at the beginning of their marriage journey, some of them decades into the journey, and I tried to discern what is the one thing that seems to make the biggest difference in the type of marriage you get to experience together. What's the one thing that I would want to encourage you with on your wedding day? And then I had a better idea. I thought, what would Jesus want to say to you on your wedding day? What's the one thing that he would say makes the biggest difference? And we can't know for sure, but I have a guess. I've spent an inordinate amount of time studying Jesus' words and the stories that are recorded of his life and teachings. And I think what Jesus would say to you on your wedding day is what will make the most difference in the type of marriage you get to enjoy together is what you do with what you know. I think Jesus would tell you that doing makes the difference. And I didn't totally make that up. That comes from a teaching of Jesus. It actually is found right at the end of the most famous block of Jesus' teaching in the Bible, the Sermon on the Mount. And so up near the Sea of Galilee, I picture a day much like today. You know, the wind is blowing, the birds are singing, and Jesus begins to teach people. And the Sermon on the Mount is massive in scope. It talks about what to do when you're wrong, how to handle your finances, how do you engage a life of grace and truth and forgiveness. And then at the end of this block of teaching, Jesus tells his listeners a parable. As you know, a parable is a story. It's fictional, but it helps us see things from heaven's perspective. And so at the end of this teaching, where Jesus is given all sorts of instructions on how to behave, he tells a story to help them understand how to get the impact of what he's just taught them. And it's recorded for us by Jesus' follower Matthew, who was there. Matthew records these words of Jesus. Jesus says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on the rock." And what I see in this teaching is that Jesus wants more for his followers than attending church and taking notes, though attending church and taking notes is a fantastic thing to do. It's not enough to hear what Jesus says. We're supposed to do something with what we hear. As Jesus continues to tell us why. He says, "The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house." So the question isn't whether storms will come in life. Life is full of storms of all sorts of different colors and flavors. Storms are hard, but Jesus offers his followers a way to prepare for them before they come. And when we do what Jesus says to do, we build our lives on eternal principles. We lean into the way God intended for people to live. And when we do this, we build resilience into our lives and resilience into our marriages. And as someone who's been married now for well over a decade, I'm telling you, resilient marriages are better marriages. Resilience is staying power. It's the ability to be at your best when life isn't at its best. Jesus describes the resilient life this way. He says, "The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock." As Jesus continues, he tells a contrasting story of someone he calls the foolish builder. And in the Jewish mind, a fool is someone who doesn't connect their choices with their consequences. This man chooses to build his house on a fragile foundation by doing nothing with what he knew to do, and the same storms come. And his house, his life, is in a lot of trouble. And so what I see in this, and how I'd love to encourage you as you venture forth as husband and wife, is to prepare your hearts and your lives before the storms come. And you do that by doing what Jesus tells us to do. What we do to prepare for a storm changes how we get to experience life within the storm. And I thought about, okay, how does this actually shake down in the context of marriage? And I just wanted to give you three sort of examples from my experience. Jesus, for example, instructs his followers to submit to one another, to put the other person before yourself. And this is an amazing life principle. It helps all relationships, but I think it's particularly helpful in the context of marriage. When a husband and wife each decide to put the other first, life works better. The biggest problem you have is where to go to dinner, because you just keep saying, "Where do you want to go? I don't know, where do you want to go?" And eventually you end up at Applebee's. It all goes up, right? So as you try to navigate the things you'll need to buy, the places you'll need to go, the holiday commitments you'll need to make, mutual submission will make your life more enjoyable. And it's counterintuitive, and that's why so many people miss it. But knowing is a powerful thing. Doing something with this principle really is what makes the difference. It's how you get to enjoy your marriage. So may you be people who pursue an others first lifestyle. As a second example, I think of Jesus' instruction to his followers to be careful with their words. Words have direction. You've never spoken a neutral word in your life. They're either making things more or less like God wants them to be. And our words shape the emotional environment of our homes. And they shape the sort of marriage we get to enjoy. There's no relationship where the power of words is more critical than in the context of your marriage, because you'll see each other at your best, and you may occasionally see each other at something less than your best. There'll be days when one of you disappoints the other by missing an expectation. One of you will be late for dinner again, forget an important date again. And the hurt is real, and it's inevitable, but the words you choose to say when you're disappointed, and sometimes the words you choose not to say when you're disappointed, shape the emotional environment of your home. In the Old Testament, we read that pleasant words make life sweet, and reckless words can wound. And so knowing this principle is good, but doing something with the principle is what makes the difference. So may you be people who balance grace and truth when you use words with one another. As a final example, Jesus instructs his followers to forgive one another. You might even say the whole economy of the gospel is forgiveness. As people who have received forgiveness from God, we're to be able to extend forgiveness to others when they do things to hurt us. There is supposed to be a connection between the vertical then that we receive from God and the horizontal that we extend to one another. This is important in all your relationships, but there's no relationship where it's more important than in the context of your marriage. It's critical that we don't allow our partners to amass an emotional debt. When we do, marriages struggle. But when a culture of forgiveness is cultivated in the home, it brings life to everyone. And so may you be people who are honest when you're hurt, but at the same time quick to extend grace and forgiveness. More than anything, may you remember knowing this principle is powerful, but it's the doing that makes the difference. And that's why I'm convinced that the one thing Jesus would want you to hear on your wedding day is a simple reminder to apply what you learn and what you continue to learn. Those of us who love you, it's our prayer that you would build your house on a firm foundation. And in doing so, you will find the peace of God even in the midst of the storms. So now, Alex and Lindsay are going to illustrate their commitment to one another and to God by utilizing this beautiful piece of wood over here with a cross on it. It's a cord of 3 strand ceremony, and each strand, one represents Alex, one represents Lindsay, and the third represents God. And so they're going to knit these 3 together, sort of in illustration of an Old Testament saying from the book of Ecclesiastes, though one may be overpowered, 2 can quickly defend themselves, and a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken.